Faction Wars can be really hard to finish, and there's few factions that are any harder than the Dark Elves. It's surprisingly difficult, and it has nothing to do with the boss. It has everything to do with the waves and the champions in this faction. I'm going to go ahead and do it. I'm going to show you guys how I'm doing stage 21. No legendaries, even adding a rare champion or two in this team. So it is something that's attainable, but it can be a little bit difficult. Anyway, I'm going to show you how it's done. Welcome, I'm the DeadwoodJedi. This is going to be another Raid Shadow Legends video. We're back doing the Faction Wars series, going through each faction and showing how you can beat it on stage 21, talking about the different bosses along the way there, looking at the champions to figure out which ones are going to be best for you to bring in and how to build them out. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Just as always, I do have blessings on some of my champions, but I never have the blessings active, so you don't ever have to worry about that. On top of that, I do try to limit the gear that I use and try to keep it to reasonable numbers here so you can get an idea of what you're shooting for. But obviously I have very good gear on my account, so you might not be able to make all the stats that I do, but it can be attainable with lesser stats that I'm using. Kind of keep that in mind. You need to balance it, observe your run, and kind of see what kind of gear you need to use to make it work. But of course, it's Faction Wars. You're just trying to get Lydia, so you only have to beat these stages and 3-star them once. If you have to use the best gear on your account to do that, it can be worth it once you get to this stage. Once you get really close to getting Lydia, it's definitely worth it because she's a game-changing champion. Ironically, in the faction we're talking about today, which is Dark Elves. So, how do we do this? Well, first, let's look at the bosses, and then we'll look at the champions, and then we'll do a run. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next one that comes out. And of course, if you enjoyed today's music, we have that SoundStripe link down below in the pinned comment description of this video, and you can use code DeadwoodJedi to save 15%. All right, stage 7 boss for this faction is going to be the Disruptor. This one is probably the easiest one to deal with, right? We're talking about Provoke, True Fear on the A2, Freeze debuffs, just a lot of debuffs, but only the Freeze is the one that's really going to lock down your champion. So if you can bring in somebody to cleanse, block debuffs, those would be great options. Otherwise, you're really just trying to beat down the boss and stay a little tanky. You have 5 champions that are all level 50 or higher. You should be able to do this. Stage 14, we're talking about the Mirror. This is one of the harder bosses to go about. Not only does he steal your buffs and throw the debuffs on him back on your champions, but he also has that health swap exchange ability with his A3 down here. And of course his AoE adds a fear debuff. So there's a lot of stuff on here not to like. The general consensus of how do you go about doing this is just try either two ways, right? One, you try to beat his HP down just low enough, not so low that he wants to do the health exchange, but not so high where you can't kill him, and then try to kill him while just kind of burst damage him in one turn. That's generally the way I like to go about doing it. The other way to do it, of course, is make sure you have enough healing so that when he does do that health exchange, you can then heal your champions up so you can survive the next attacks and then just beat him down before he gets that skill back off cooldown. On top of that, you want to make sure you're timing your buffs and your debuffs so that he's not stealing your key buffs like ally protection or block debuff, and he's not throwing back key debuffs on you like decreased defense, right? So if you can manage those things, you should be in pretty good shape. Generally will take a little bit of manualing to be able to do, but it's definitely doable, especially on stage 14. Shouldn't be too much of an issue. And then of course we get the stage 21 here. Now, interesting thing about this stage is it's not the boss that's the difficult part. The hard part about this is actually the waves getting to him, because there's 3 Valkyries, there's 2 Martyrs in one wave and then 3 Valkyries in the next. It can be very, very difficult. But I'm going to show you actually the waves on this one so you get an understanding of how to go about doing it, because that's really going to be the trick of this boss itself. Now the boss isn't crazy hard, right? Places some poisons on that A1, decreases turn meter. True Fear and poisons, and then decreases turn meter. And then HP burn when he's hit. He does have 2 minions. So with this one, the main focus is actually single target the minions. Try to avoid AoE attacks so you don't get that HP burn on you. And then once the minions are dead, that's when you want to take the boss down. So if you can do that and, bring in enough healing to stay alive, you're going to be in really good shape. But let's talk about that right now. How we're going to do that is going to be tricky because this faction has very has some big limitations in the champions that are available to you. And so let's go over those really quick so you have an idea of what to be looking for. Okay, the Dark Elf faction obviously has a ton of amazing legendaries, right? I mean, Zavia, Ray, Foley, Lanicus, right? Ghostborn, Blind Seer, Lydia, Vizier, Mithrala's in this faction, right? And that is definitely a champion all of you by this point should probably have in your roster. But let's say you don't want to use any of these champions, right? Even Visix, even Mithrala, some free champions that you're going to be getting along the way here. If you don't have them or you don't want them, there are ways to do this without it. But this faction is super tricky. And the big reason why is that there's not a lot of healing. There's not a lot of revive. And so the things that you need are limited. The good thing is there's a fair amount of control in here, right? And there's definitely, you know, some damage in here. The rest of it that's a little bit tricky. So let's kind of look at some of these champions. First off, there are some decent rares in here, right? There's no uncommons that you want. There are some decent rares, right? Hale is obviously an amazing damage dealer, somebody that you can definitely use for this boss. Spirit Host is actually pretty solid because she has a nice remove all debuff, solid cleanse with a block debuff. On a 5-turn cooldown, so it's not the best, but that can be useful in a pinch. Obviously, Cold Heart can do really good single target damage as well as turn meter control. Paragon is always a great way to cheese stuff with his unkillable ability, right? Not my favorite champion for this part of it, but definitely somebody useful. And then, of course, we have Painkeeper. Now, Painkeeper actually might be, by some people, considered essential because one of the few champions that brings healing as an AoE buff with this A2 ability. Not to mention the turn meter cooldown skill with the A3 here. There's a lot to like. I actually really recommend bringing Painkeeper in. And if you run a Bat Eater or a Batman adjacent clan boss team, you probably already have your Bat Eater built up at a very fast 240 speed, which is how fast is going to be the one I'm going to be using here. So because it's actually a really common thing that people do, I didn't feel the need to slow him down or slow her down. But Painkeeper can be extremely, extremely good for you because of that AoE heal. The other champions we have here, right, are that are going to be good it's pretty limited, honestly. Captain Tamalia does provide a lot of healing, right? Increased defense buff here. That's an AoE and a heal of all allies of her max HP. So you build her HP really high. That's going to make the heals even better. This can be really, really good. The same concept as with Painkeeper. So just kind of keep that in mind. Those are definitely good options. She has an ally protection as well. So she's definitely a very good option as far as trying to keep your team alive. You're just going to want to build her extremely tanky, right? You do not want her to die if you do that. Kaiden has a revive ability. That's a really important skill. There's very few champions in this faction that have a revive. In fact, there's 3 that are epics, right? Kaiden, Rion. Rion's excellent, but he's also a Doom Tower champion. I'm going to assume that if you're at this struggle, you might not have him, so I'm not including him, but this is absolutely a fantastic champion to bring in. Not only does Rion have a buff strip, remember Valkyrie waves, that can be extremely valuable for you, but also does have a single target revive. So that is somebody I would be looking to bring in if you have them available. Fang Cleric's the other one, right? And this is, I mean, single target revive, not a bad skill, but really, you know, that's pretty much it. Does have a single target heal as well, which is okay, but I mean, just single target's not really what we're looking for in this kind of a situation. So that's it. That's it for revivers and healers, guys. 4 champions. Not a lot of options there, and that's why it can be a little bit tricky with this faction, right? I don't think the rest. Yeah, no, she does damage. Gwyneth does. I think does Gwyneth do healing? Nah, a little bit of heal here based off of damage, but that's not practical when it really comes down to it. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Now, the one thing this faction does have a lot of is control, right? We're talking about CC skills. We're talking about turn meter control. And the best champion at this, who I'm going to be using, is going to be Sylar. Now, Sylar has all AoE attacks, has a decreased speed, turn meter drop, incredibly powerful to have on your team, right? Really recommend. You're going to be able to see that in this run. You have Luria here, who has an AoE freeze. This is a great way to help deal with those Valkyrie waves, which I'm going to be doing again. I definitely recommend her as well. Now, the hard part with Luria, something to keep in mind, look at that base HP, only 13,000. It's really tough to build her tanky. She could be really, really squished. So you got to be careful of that. But yeah, you want to make sure you're getting some kind of control in here. I believe Crimson Helm, yeah, she has an AoE provoke, right? Which is another great option here. Revive on death, increased defense. So there are some champions that have some abilities that can be helpful for you. Madame Saris also has that true, the fear and the true fear, the buff strip, another really good champion to bring in against the Valkyrie waves. But it's a little bit, it's a little bit tight. The biggest negative with this faction though is there's only one AoE decreased defense champion, and that's Spider. Spider's very good. Places this, it's not a hit, so cannot weak hit. Decreased defense, weaken. Very, very valuable. Also has an AoE with decreased attack, and I believe it has decreased buff duration as well, and a strip on the A1. So definitely a good champion to bring in. I'm going to be using Spider, and definitely if you have them, someone you want to bring in. But this is one of the harder factions to deal with. Just FYI, it's not going to be easy to go if you don't have the right champions. Delver's an interesting champion, right? Not my favorite. Does have kind of a 75% chance AoE decreased defense, which isn't bad, as well as weaken here and heal reduction. Not my favorite option, but if you're stuck, and that might just be something you have to deal with here. But those are kind of the things that you'd want to work with, right? And then of course, damage is another part of it. You do have to kill somebody. Dark Kill would be amazing if you have Dark Kill. Definitely you're going to want to probably use Dark Kill, but Lua is a really strong single target damage dealer, single target and AoE, but I'm actually going to be using Kale in this, so you'll be able to kind of see how that works. In fact, I can show you my team that I'm going to be using here. So this is the team I'm going to be using, right? We've got Sylar, Kale, Painkeeper, Luria, and Spider on this team. I like this team. I'm not using any revivers. My only healer is Painkeeper. This shows that you don't necessarily need those champions to have success in this faction, even without any legendaries. But obviously it is going to be a little tricky. You're going to need to utilize your stun sets, your provokes, try to, really maximize what you're able to make happen to survive these waves and get through to the boss. I actually have Luria in a bolster set for the extra healing. The shield's nice, but really it's for the healing. And I've got obviously Sylar in a stun set as well, just so we can get some kind of CC out there in addition to Luria's freeze. But you're going to see this team actually works really, really well. And so that's definitely, this is not an easy boss by any means. It has to do with the wave. So let's jump in. I'll show you what I mean. All right. So again, we're coming in on these waves. We've got 2 martyrs. Once those counterattacks go out, it's going to be a real pain in the butt. A1 start off with Painkeeper there. And then we have Spider. We can go ahead and get that decreased defense and weaken. You can see how nice that is. And then look at this turn meter control from Sylar. Just drops them all 40% of their turn meter, drops the decreased speed. And they're not going to take a turn, right? Get some freeze out there. We almost got it to everybody, but not quite. That's okay. We've got Kale coming in with some big hits. We've still got Painkeeper to go. I don't even have to use the turn meter reduction yet. I can wait on that a little bit. We can get the decreased attack from Spider, AoE, right? Get the decreased accuracy from Sylar. Maybe get a stun out there. We didn't, but that's okay. We don't need it. We can do a bunch of other things here, right? So now it's just about who we're going to take out. I think Martyr's the most dangerous out of all the options, quite frankly. So that's who I'm going to be aiming to try and kill first. We do have damage from Spider. We have damage from Kale. That's our main damage focus. Everything else is just everything else, really, at this point. But right now, because we're able to reduce its cooldowns of things, go through it all, get some AoE hits in, I'm just looking to really focus on Martyr, and then the rest of them I'm not as worried about at all. I don't think I want to use Sylar's turn meter reduction again. I do want to make sure I have that for the next wave. You know what? No, I'm going to wait for it. I want to make sure we have it for the next wave. The next wave should be pretty doable. And so it's really my focus right now is just killing everybody that I can while we can. So I'm going to try to do my best to do that. We do still have that stun from Thylar. Try and take down this other martyr if possible. But look at their turn meter. They're so much slower. Not only do they have decreased speed, but the turn meter reduction as well. And that really gives us the potential, the option to go ahead and go through and knock them down. All right, so here we go. I just want to make sure we should have all of our skills back, so I don't feel like I need to worry about it. We're just going to start with that A1. Decrease defense and weaken. Boom. Turn meter reduction. And I did get resisted by a couple of them, which is always unfortunate, but get the freeze out. So we've frozen some of them. Not everybody. Okay. Get some damage in. Let's go ahead and reset our skills. Get that decrease attack AoE. I did put a curse set on Spider, so we have some hexes, which I think is really fun to be able to do. Just throw that out there. No more stuns either. Oh, that's unfortunate. But we can try to throw a block buffs here. That's great. Another thing about Luria, block buffs. So it's another way to kind of reduce the potential damage. Oh yeah, we did get a stun here on that Valkyrie. So every Valkyrie is pretty limited at this point. I want to try and kill this one before. Yeah, that's unfortunate. I was afraid that might happen. But it's okay because we have so much CC going out there. It's not a worry for us right now. And that's really the best part. So I can still attack several of these champions without having to worry about them counterattacking me, which is kind of the key. And that bolster shield isn't too shabby either. Okay, okay. That was unnecessary. Let's get a little AoE. Boom. Unfortunately, now they're coming out of their stun stage. And that's the best part too. There we go. We froze them again. And we can I think we should be able to wipe the floor with these guys at this point, which is ideal. And right now I'm just using all my A1 so I can get all my cooldowns back. So when we face the big boss, we're going to be fully prepped and ready to take them on. And that's all I need to do. Boom. There we go. All right, now we're at the boss. Like I said, not going to revive these enemies. I don't have to worry about them. So what I want to do is try and focus, single target the minions. That also helps me avoid getting those HP burn debuffs, which is going to be problematic. Turn meter control will work with them as well. Now here with Luria, I do not mind getting a freeze out, even though it's an AoE. That's fine. I think that's totally worth it, just to make sure that we can get our damage out, get these guys locked down. Same thing with the decreased attack. It's going to be worth it to help limit the damage from the boss. Obviously, that wasn't great, but is what it is. Hopefully, we can go ahead and hurt some of these guys. And that True Fear is annoying, I have to say. And that's pretty much, this is pretty much the goal here, right? Just try and limit them as much as possible. Survive the attacks when they come. Now, obviously, Kale has some really nice AoE skills. I would like to use those, but I think even more important than that is making sure that we don't die prematurely, and avoiding those HP burns is a great way to avoid dying prematurely. We can go ahead and refresh those debuffs. Let's finish this one off. There we go. We've got decreased accuracy out already. Got decreased attack. Oh, we don't have decreased attack out. Maybe I should do that. See if we can freeze that guy. Great. Froze the minion. Don't have to worry about him anymore, which is fantastic. Do a little refresh action. That decreased accuracy. Got a stun out of that, which is great. Exactly what we wanted. Go ahead and get that going. I think now would be a good time to get our AoE heal in if we can. There we go. And because of that decreased accuracy, we're able to actually resist a lot of those debuffs, which is fantastic. And at this point, I can pretty much click auto. There's not a lot to worry about, right? My hat goes askew. There's not a lot to worry about, as like at this point, We're going to get debuffed sometimes with the HP burn, but not much we can do about that. We just need to kill this boss before he kills us, is essentially how this works. So that's our goal at this point, but all it is focus those single target minions on the side, avoid taking damage while you're doing that, and then you can commit whole hog on taking down the boss here, just like we're doing right now, and hopefully we'll be able to do it enough where we won't die, we won't lose anybody. Yeah, Kale's tough enough where it's not hurting us, and we're pulling the turn meter, putting that slow out, getting those poisons going. Do get that heal from Painkeeper, which is great, and then we're good to go. That's it. So it's not easy, and took us 8 minutes to do it, but it is definitely something that we can do to get through this stuff. So that's kind of the focus of this team. If we start off taking a look at Sylar, I think one of the best champions you can bring in for this faction, right? We got decent speed, 211. It's nothing crazy. Honestly, I would love to have her even faster. The more we can cycle her skills, the more premier control we can have on the enemy and really prevent them from ever taking a turn, whether they're debuffed or not. That would have helped a lot with those Valkyrie waves in particular. I love a stun set on her. I think that's an ideal set to put on her. Really helps to lock down the enemies. One of the only AoE only champions in this faction, so definitely something I would recommend there. Masteries, I just went offense and support tree. I probably should have taken War Master in all honesty, but this is an old build. I didn't feel like changing it. Another thing to kind of show you, you don't have to have perfect builds to be able to knock out these factions. Then we have Spider. I put Spider in a curse set. I don't know how valuable that is. Did help us get through the runs a little faster, but outside of that, is probably not really even worth doing. I just wanted to mix it up. A stun set would make a lot more sense in all honesty, but again, I just wanted to try some different things here. You could just go pure damage, honestly, not bad. Being able to have decreased defense and weaken makes even the most benign damage dealers pretty dangerous out here. Very fast is just kind of how I had this one built. You can see I don't even really have good crit rate or crit damage on them, which I thought I had built them for damage. That's kind of interesting to me, because what that tells me is that Spider can do pretty decent damage for you if you build it. It's not like I would use him anywhere else outside of Faction Wars for damage, but within this faction, it's not a bad option to choose. So definitely something to kind of keep in mind as you go about building your champion as an option there. It does have a nice AoE ability, so putting a stun set could work pretty decently. But I think just as easily you just go with whatever normal stuff you need. So other than accuracy, that's pretty much all you're going to need. You can see mastery wise, I went down offensive tree, down to War Master, and support tree for more turn meter and duration of those debuffs. And then we have Luria. Now, I didn't even put masteries on her, so you can see how much you need all that stuff. I built her for tankiness, right? 3,000 defense, 40 plus K HP. That's kind of like, oh, she'll survive this. I had originally built her like in a more attack build, and boy, was she squishy and died like that. Only having a 13,000 base HP makes it really hard to build that up. Even 40,000 is a difficult task. So I do recommend, builders to survive if you're going to use her. Really, you're bringing her in for that freeze that she has, that AoE freeze ability and the block buffs ability. Bring her in for the debuff. So that's what you want to focus on. Make sure she has enough accuracy and enough ability to survive. I do have her about 200 speed. This is kind of where you always want your champions for Faction Wars. About 200 speed or faster is going to be a really good, nice sweet spot for you there. Now, a lot of these builds for me are like legacy builds. These are champions I used in the past and just haven't really touched in a long time, or I kitted them out with leftover gear for things like Doom Tower secret rooms. And Kale's a good example of that. Not everything's roll. It's a bunch of different, set combinations. It's decent build, but nothing spectacular, but it got the job done. And he's a very good damage dealing champion. Now, only had about 4,600 HP, right? I'm sorry, 3,600? 36,000 HP, about 2,000 defense. So he's not like a super tanky boy here, but it was enough to withstand some of those hits from the boss, especially with the decreased attack up. Made it a lot easier. Another good reason why bringing Luria in was very helpful for me. Only 190 speed, so nothing crazy fast. Offensive tree, defensive tree definitely helped. But yeah, obviously solid champion. We all know how good Kale is, but even as a rare champion, very good. I realize now I do have Phantom Touch on him, so he does have a mastery or a blessing. The only one, I forgot I had it, but it's rare, so it doesn't count. Then I have my Painkeeper here. Now, I somehow didn't finish doing the masteries, so that's some extra damage, putting a War Master on, some extra healing with the, or I don't even know what I would put on with the support tree. Probably more healing. I don't know. There's definitely some other options I could have gone with here, right? But generally, you're going to use a clan boss build because that's generally where you're using Painkeeper, but very good in this approach, right? You can see how many turns you could take going 240 speed. Definitely gives them a lot of turn meter ability here, and that's really good. Now, I got about 50,000 HP. Can definitely build that higher. The more HP Painkeeper has, the more healing Painkeeper will do. So keep that in mind when you're building your champion. That's going to be the same kind of thing if you decide to go with Captain Tamelia instead, but Painkeeper is a really, really good choice. Works really good in the stun set as well with that AoE A2. So you definitely have options as far as how to build Painkeeper if this is someone that you choose to use. So the Dark Elf faction, definitely one of the more difficult ones. It really has to do with the waves, not the boss. So kind of keep that in mind when you're going in there. You have to have a plan of attack for dealing with the Valkyries. And it may take, as it often does with those waves, the Valkyrie waves especially, it may take multiple tries to get through it, right? RNG is definitely something you want on your side. Once you get to the boss, it's just a matter about surviving, right? If you can survive long enough to take out the minions first, it shouldn't be an issue killing the boss itself. But that is kind of the trick, taking out the minions first to get to the boss. There's definitely substitutes for pretty much all these champions, right? Madame Ceres is a great sub for Spider if you don't have Spider. There's a bunch of different, well, there's not a bunch of different options. You can use champions like Rion the Conqueror would be great, obviously, for Luria, to strip those Valkyrie buffs, even if you aren't going to try and CC those champions, right? So there's definitely some options here, right? Captain Tamelia is a good healing option instead of Painkeeper, but it is very champion specific on how you do this. Very champion specific. I remember when I did this the first time, I ended up using, I think I used Madame Ceres. I believe I used Lua instead of Kale. And I don't know, I didn't use Luria, that's for sure. I'm trying to think who I did use. I think I might have used Crimson Helm with the Provoke as well. Or I think I used Kaiden as well. Kaiden gives an AoE decrease attack as well as an AoE revive. Or not an AoE, but I think a single or two target revive. So that, you know, there's definitely more options on how you can go about doing this, how you can be successful with this. We have more sets available now than we ever have. Which makes it a lot easier to kind of, you know, find alternate ways to get the things that we want done. So anyway, that's the video, guys. Hopefully this was helpful for you. Don't stress if you're struggling with it. It's a very common thing to do, but it is also a very beatable dungeon. So just kind of keep that in mind. You can always use your best, you know, your best gear on your account if this is your last one to get through here. So, you know, getting Lydia, definitely a good goal to get at. Anyway, that's all for me today, guys. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next we meet, I'm the Deadwood Jedi.